Hello, I'm Mr. McBrien. This is tej2o drivers. So we've talked previously about the idea that every hardware device needs an interpreter with a given operating system. While there are some standard modes of communication between a computer and a given kind of device, there are lots of things that are unique to a given model. And every operating system needs to be taught how to talk to every device. So this knowledge of how to talk to a device, is provided by a small program that we call a driver. Now, if we look at things from the point of view of a manufacturer, when the manufacturer develops a new piece of hardware, they have to decide who they want to be able to use it. They essentially have a marketing department meeting, and they say, all right, who's going to be able to use this? Is it going to be people with only the platform of Windows PC? Are we going to support Apple? Are we going to support a Linux PC? Are we going to support custom devices, maybe like a custom cash register or something like this? Now, even after they know the platform they're going to use, they need to think about the version of a given operating system. So they might support any combination of versions of the operating system. And believe it or not, even after that, they then have to decide what kind of architecture they'll support, because there are different flavors of the same operating system. Now, this is the tough part from the point of view of the manufacturer. For every platform, version, architecture combination, there needs to be a unique driver for each model of their hardware. Now, this will make them reluctant to come out with new hardware, but it'll also make some hardware manufacturers simply make a decision to say, we're not going to support a given operating system, or maybe even not even support a platform. They might make a Windows-only printer, for example. Now, when we need the correct driver for a given system, when we have a modern operating system, it's generally designed to find the right driver pretty much automatically. For example, for Windows 7, we just start the Add a Device wizard and work from there. And in general, it can do a pretty good job of finding that driver on the internet. And in some cases, the feedback between it through the USB port will mean we'll configure the device completely automatically. Now, in some cases, it won't be possible to use this tool, for example, when we can't get online. And in these cases, we need to manually search for that driver ourselves on a different computer. Now, there's maybe one rule of thumb that's useful to think about, and that is, wherever possible, try to get your driver from the manufacturer's website. There are other places that will offer you drivers for your given situation. Now, it's not guaranteed that there's any problem with that driver, but if you're not getting it from the manufacturer's website, you're installing programs provided by people you don't know, and you can't be sure of what they're going to do to your computer. They may be perfectly legit, but why take the chance if you can get it from the manufacturer's website? Quick note about Linux drivers. So, Linux is very popular, but the user base is much, much smaller than Windows. And even worse, there are far more flavors of Linux than there are of Windows. Far more versions of the operating system. And there are lots of hardware manufacturers that simply say, coding a Linux driver for our tool just doesn't fit with our needs. We don't imagine that's going to increase sales enough. Linux drivers can be found for some devices, and typically those drivers are coded by the community rather than the manufacturer. But it's pretty hit or miss. You can't be sure you're going to have a driver for a given printer, for example. And what this means is a lot, maybe arguably most Linux users, they run a dual boot system, and they have some flavor of Windows to support additional hardware that Linux won't support. Now, we've been concerned with our compact D510s over the last week and a half or so, and we've installed Windows XP, and many of us have noted already that this installation doesn't have the custom drivers we would like to have for our machines. We install XP, and there's no support for high-resolution video or for the Ethernet card. So when this occurs, we have to go and locate and download the drivers for these things before our computer is working absolutely optimally. Now, if someone's going to reinstall Windows on a working computer, they'll typically go and make sure they have all these drivers on the disk before they start their reinstall process. We didn't do that, but that's okay. We can work backwards. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But I do want to make a point here, and that is that the original people who bought those compact D510s a decade or so ago, they didn't have to go through and find these drivers. Why not? Well, essentially this has to do with some business aspects of computers. Microsoft has an agreement with computer manufacturers, and they allow those manufacturers to create their own original equipment manufacturer copies of Windows that include key drivers for the specific machines they anticipate are going to run that version. So the install disk has the drivers you need to run the computer effectively. And back in the aughts, a decade or so ago, there was a disk somewhere that had all those drivers on it. That disk is long gone. Now, if you make a purchase of a computer, what you want to do is make sure you make a backup of your version of Windows and keep it safe. And for completeness sake, I'll mention that these unique versions of Windows, we refer to those as ISOs. So to elaborate a bit more on this, when you buy a new computer, it'll have an operating system included. It's often pre-installed with no disk included in the package. And this is just to cut costs more than anything else. As soon as you purchase this computer, you should go to the manufacturer's website and download the ISO for your computer. And you'll typically use the serial number for the computer to make that download, or sometimes the registration numbers off the side of your computer. So after you do that, burn a DVD of the operating system and put it somewhere in a safe place. Label it, keep it safe. And that'll have all the drivers for your computer. You won't have to go through and find those manually. And just to be clear, backing up your operating system in this way is totally legal. It's just a way that you can be sure you can recover your computer. As long as you don't distribute that operating system, it's perfectly legal to make that copy. So what if you didn't make a copy? What if it was a year ago and you didn't know you should make a copy? Well, manufacturers are supposed to retain copies of that ISO for you to download. If you have the registration numbers, you should be able to go to the manufacturer's site and download the correct ISO. And I did take a quick look, and it seems like Windows XP no longer is supported by HP and Compaq. Of course, they merged. It seems there's no longer a downloadable ISO for that, and that's part of why we took that step of going and manually getting these drivers. So to elaborate on that again, as you're putting your computer together, if you haven't already, you're going to need to install at least 3 drivers. You'll need a video driver to get a high-resolution display. You'll need an Ethernet driver so that you can get access to the network and access to internet. And then we'll install a printer driver. And this is just to illustrate the differences between installing a printer driver and installing the other components. So I'd encourage you, while your installations are being done, there's plenty of waiting time. Go grab an internet-enabled machine and search for the drivers you need. And you can save them on a USB drive and have them ready for when Windows is installed. In terms of finding those drivers, finding drivers in general, you just want to go into Google and search on your computer. So type in the computer name in the search window. Then type the operating system, and then the piece of hardware, and then make sure you include the word driver. And when you do this, you can do a search in Google and look through the search results and try to find the original manufacturer of your Ken. So my Acer laptop, my personal one, a first hit was the Acer website. And it is best to go and try first to find the drivers you need from the manufacturer themselves. And again, that might be the manufacturer of the computer in some cases, if it's something on board, or like the video driver or the Ethernet card, or it might be the manufacturer of, for example, the printer. In terms of installing drivers, it's very simple. You copy them to the machine and you double-click on them. Printer drivers, you may need to, you're more likely to use the Add a Printer Windows utility and follow the wizard there and specify the drivers. So I did a quick screen capture here from, I believe, my Windows 7 installation, the Add a Printer installation there. So to conclude, computer hardware generally doesn't work without drivers. Those drivers may be present in the background, but they are present. When they're not, the hardware won't work. Drivers are specific to the operating system, the version of the operating system, and the hardware that they're running. If you install Windows using a generic ISO, you'll find that you'll be missing certain computer-specific drivers for even your most basic components, and you'll need to fix that before you can use Windows effectively. In contrast, the OEM ISO that is provided with your computer should have most of your drivers on installation. This is a problem that is beginning to go away with time. Modern operating systems and Google have made it easier and easier to find the drivers we need, such that it's not nearly the hassle it was a decade ago. I did include one reference here to some discussion about ISO files for anyone who's curious. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.